All right, so it's 11 o'clock. We're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Allie Shipman. I am the Parent to Parent Program Coordinator here at the WVU CED. A few housekeeping things before we get started. You can have your video on or off. If you have it off, we just ask that you attend to the material being presented, and we just ask that you remain muted throughout the presentation so it limits distractions. But you are all here today for the virtual speaker series all about Birth to Three, where we welcome the director of the West Virginia Birth to Three program, Mel Woodcock. So, welcome, Mel.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you for this invitation. Any opportunity that I have to talk about our program, I jump on it because this is such a valuable program for the infants and toddlers and families in the state of West Virginia who have children that have a developmental delay or risk factors. And so thank you for this invitation. And I think this invitation, Alicia, I don't know if you were aware of this, but we are currently celebrating the 50th anniversary of the enactment of the special education law that supports providing services birth through 21. And so that celebration has been occurring all year round for different programs across the nation. And so I thought maybe I'd share just a little bit of information about the special education law that supports our program and also services for children 3 through 21. And so
All
for
right, let them know. Thank you. Bye.
And so just wanted to provide just a couple of thoughts. It was November 29th in 1975 when Gerald Ford signed into law the Education for Handicapped Act. And the law was actually born out of the civil rights movement. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And it's very important to understand kind of the history of how our special education law came into being. And so at the time that it was enacted, we had just moved through the civil rights movement. We had a lot of Vietnam veterans coming back from the war who had disabilities. So there was a lot of interest in ensuring that everyone no matter what their disability, was able to have access to educational opportunities. It wasn't until 1986 that the early childhood section of the law, which was called Part H, was enacted. And then in 1990, the law was actually changed to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that is the federal law that we follow in West Virginia Birth to Three. And I find this very interesting. And since there's so many parents joining us today, it wasn't until 1990 that the law, special education law, expanded to include children on the autism spectrum, children that had traumatic brain injury. And then also it was the first time in 1990 where there was a strong emphasis on parent involvement, also ensuring that transition from West Virginia Birth to Three early childhood early intervention programs into preschool programs or transition out of school at, graduation into either work or college opportunities really was emphasized, as well as access to the general curriculum. And so that's not that long ago that there was a recognition that our children with special needs should have access to the general curriculum. And then there's been some amendments along the way, and all of those provisions have been strengthened. And the last thing I just wanted to share was when the law was enacted in 1975, there was a call for the program to be fully funded, and it's never been fully funded. And so I think this is really timely that we're in the first week of December and the 50th anniversary of the law that we follow here for West Virginia Birth to Three was on November 29th. And so, Alicia, I don't know if you knew that and the timing was just right or the plan is all lined up, but we're really thrilled to share that little bit of celebration, especially since we have a lot of families joining us today. And so I'm going to move along and provide some information about our wonderful program, West Virginia Birth to Three. And so what I wanted to do was to begin sharing a little bit about the importance of the first 3 years of life and why we have the West Virginia Birth to Three system. And so what we know from research, especially research over the past 3 decades, is that development is rapid and extensive. And so we want to always be cognizant that we don't want to wait to receive referrals for children that might be in need of special education services through West Virginia Birth to Three. We want to ensure that those referrals come to us as quickly as possible. We don't want to miss any opportunity to make a difference in the child's life. We also know through research that development occurs through a combination of genetics and the child's environment and the child's ability to participate successfully in experiences that all infants and toddlers experience when they're at home or in childcare or within their community. And that once again, the earlier we can support children, the better outcomes that children have. And so I just love this picture because it reminds us of the importance of the work that we do. And so when we talk about early development, there is quite a range of when children achieve developmental milestones. And so as we go through how we determine eligibility for West Virginia Birth to Three, I think it's really important to understand that, where sometimes we may get a referral of a child, and through our evaluation assessment process, we determine that that child is developing. On time or within an appropriate um, time capsule, I guess. And so there is some flexibility in when children achieve developmental milestones. And so we also know that there's a lot of things that impact the child's development, such as a child's um, health status, a medical condition, the family life, the child's experiences, and also the family's beliefs and values and traditions. And so we do serve families from a variety of different cultures. And so in some cultures, families might be carrying their babies longer than in other cultures. Some cultures don't actually introduce a spoon or a fork until much later because children finger feed until they learn how to use chopsticks. And so we need to be aware of all the cultural diversity that influences development as well. And so the way that babies organize information can vary depending on their genetics, their life experiences, what the family is offering to support the baby's development, and their culture. And so we want to always be cognizant of all those things when we are supporting children and supporting families. We also want to be aware that the structure and dynamics of families have changed over the last several decades as well. When I first started providing early intervention services 40 years ago, most of our children were in two-parent families, and the dad ran off to work and the mom stayed home. And so we were doing a lot of support within home visiting directly with parent, the mom. Now that we have more and more families working, and in West Virginia, we have a lot of dynamics impacting and influencing the families that we serve. We also, as we're welcoming families into our system, we need to take that into consideration as well. And so what we are seeing in the families that we serve here with West Virginia Birth to Three is that there are more single parent and households and more working moms, and sometimes our mothers may have more than one job. We have more families that live in poverty and might be isolated from other family members than we've ever served before. We have families that might be experiencing violence at home or within their community. And also we're seeing an increase in numbers of families that may be impacted by substance use disorders. And so when we partner with families, we always try to gather information about who's living in the home, the kinds of resources the family already has access to, um, what kinds of barriers they may have to accessing supports, maybe a lack of transportation, maybe they've just lost their health insurance, maybe they live in a part of a city where there's a little bit more concern or fear about safety, and so they're afraid to take their children out for walks. And so there's just a variety of things that we need to consider as we're supporting families. And we do have a lot of moms in recovery. We have a lot of children in our program who've been removed and placed in foster care or with other family members because of substance use disorders. And so, as we think about the children that we're serving in West Virginia in the birth to three population, we not only consider what the child brings to our partnership with the child and family in regards to medical diagnoses or health conditions or other um, influences, the ability to have access to books or to have access to opportunities to learn. But we also think about the family because um, children don't grow in isolation of the family or other caregivers that are supporting them. And so there has been an increased prevalence of children who have developmental disabilities. And so we have some data here that in the United States between 2009 to 2017, there was a 17% increase in the numbers of children aged 3 through 17 who were diagnosed with a developmental disability. And that's representing 1 in 6 children who may need educational supports. And the CDC is now estimating the prevalence, and I believe this isn't even current. I believe the prevalence is now for children on the autism spectrum 1 in 131. And so we're seeing more and more children on the autism spectrum. And West Virginia Birth to Three has made a commitment in the last year to provide diagnostics to be able to diagnose children on the autism spectrum earlier than the age 3 because there tends to be a larger waiting list at our 2 diagnostic centers in the state of West Virginia. And so we're trying to assist families in having that earlier identification. And I think I have mentioned this before, that research again demonstrates that early detection of developmental disabilities and appropriate interventions can really significantly change the outcome for children who have a diagnosed disability or developmental delay. And so for our families in West Virginia, no matter what their circumstances are, or no matter what the child's characteristics are, all families tend to have the same questions because they love their children and they want their children to go and develop like other children of a similar age. And so for common questions for families that are interested in pursuing West Virginia Birth to Three services is, is my child growing and developing on schedule at the same as other children his or her age? There may be questions about specific developmental skills that kind of are forefront in families' minds. Why is my child not yet sitting up? All my other friends' children are already sitting up and walking. Why is my child not yet walking or talking? Or my child cannot feed himself yet. My child is not playing with a variety of toys. And so families tend to have very specific, important questions that pop into their mind when they're considering whether or not to reach out to community services and supports. And those questions, I hope our physicians across the state, when families bring those questions forward, know about Birth to Three and can say, well, hey, there is a program that can support you in answering those questions. And so families are reaching out to ask what's available within my community that can help me with my child's development. And so we work closely with many different agencies across the state in supporting children and families and making sure that they are connected to the resources that can help strengthen them as a family and help them in supporting their child's development. And so we work closely with our school districts. We look closely with Early Head Start and Head Start, all of our home visitation programs. We, by federal law, do support our primary referral sources in knowing how to screen a child's development and to be able to make an appropriate referral to West Virginia Birth to 3. And so our physicians' offices, our clinics, other places where families may um, be bringing their children to get support. And so we all want to work together because one program can't meet the needs of all the children and families. And so we work collaboratively with all of our programs across the state. And so we're just one of the programs that, of course, serve children under the age of 3. And so West Virginia Birth to 3 is a system of services and supports that is designed to meet the unique developmental needs of our infants and toddlers, birth through age 2 up until their 3rd birthday, with special needs in their families. We are a special education program, as I mentioned before, through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. We are Part C of that act. For children referred to West Virginia Birth to 3, children must be eligible in one of 3 eligibility categories according to our state definition. And so children may be eligible due to a developmental delay. In our system, our requirement around developmental delay is that a child would either have the equivalent to a 40% delay in one developmental area or equivalent of a developmental delay in 2 or more developmental areas. And our developmental areas are language, cognition, uh, motor, social emotional skills, and what we call adaptive skills, which are self-help skills. A child also can be eligible if they have a diagnosed physical or mental condition that may result in a developmental delay. And so these are medical diagnoses that the research has shown that there's a high probability that if a child has that diagnosed medical condition, that there's a high probability that the child will experience a delay. And so that may be a child on the autism spectrum, a child that has a diagnosed con genetic condition, a child that, such as Down syndrome, a child that has been diagnosed with a cerebral palsy or a variety of other genetic conditions. And so we know that those children are automatically eligible for our program under the federal law to allow that early identification because the first 3 years of development is so important. We also, in West Virginia, we're one of the few states that also has an at-risk category. And these are children that have a medical condition that does not have a high probability of leading to developmental delay all by itself, but in combination with family circumstances that may impact the family's ability to maybe follow up with the required medical interventions or for example, a child may have chronic ear infections, and we know that if a child doesn't have the appropriate medicines or the tubes placed in their ear to drain the fluid that's in the child's ear, that if the family can't follow up on those things, that the child maintains that fluid and it can impact their language development. And so for our risk factor category, those are children that have a combination of a medical diagnosis and a family factor that impacts the ability to be able to follow through with the kinds of medical interventions or other interventions that might prevent the child from developing a developmental delay. Not all children referred to birth to 3 are eligible, and that's why we work closely with all of our other early childhood programs to be able to provide linkages to those programs when children are not eligible for our West Virginia birth to 3 services. And also, it's very important that there are no income eligibility requirements, and our program is voluntary on the part of the family. And so I want to pause here to see if there's any questions about how children might be eligible for West Virginia birth to 3.
I have a quick question. What about neonatal abstinence syndrome? Is that an indicator that automatically qualifies them or no?
It does not in the state of West Virginia. And so I'm assuming that you're meaning neonatal abstinence syndrome in regards to children who have been exposed to opioids and not
Yes.
children that have exposure to a variety of different other substances. And so the research is still holding that children who've been exposed to opioids only and no other substance, that there is not a high probability of developmental delay. There can be impacts to development, um, and those children typically come to us with a developmental delay, if that makes sense. And so they've gone through their withdrawal symptoms. They have gone home. The family or foster family or whatever primary caregiver is supporting that child is trying to promote development, but there is an emerging delay that is perhaps occurring later on in development. The children that we're very, very concerned about are the children that are being exposed to fentanyl, to other substances where we are seeing immediate impacts to the child's development when they're referred to us, and the children that there's polyuse. And so there's children who've been exposed to opioids, but also the mom is drinking, smoking cigarettes, maybe using another substance. And so I hope that answers your question. There are a couple of states nationally in the Part C world that do have automatic eligibility for the first year, and they're kind of monitoring those children that only have opioid exposure only. And within the first year, if those developmental delays in behavior and language, some of the things that may occur later on, they then are no longer eligible after the first year. And so I think the research may not yet, you would we would hope that there would be more research out there. Our field tells us that they do see developmental delays emerging later on, but not at the necessarily the earliest, you know, within the month or two after the baby is born.
Yeah, I know in West Virginia, we don't have as much of a problem anymore with just opioid use disorder. It's typically methamphetamines and
Yeah,
polysubstance use.
yeah. And those kiddos definitely are coming to us with developmental delays and are accessing services through us with those developmental delays. Yeah, it's kind of shifted over time, hasn't it, Kristen?
Yes, it
Where,
definitely has.
yeah, where before 10 years ago, we were very concerned about children being exposed to the opioids, and the research just was not um, supporting that there was a high probability of developmental delay. Developmental delay could occur depending on environment, other genetics, those kinds of considerations. But we serve a lot of kiddos that have been exposed, a whole lot of kiddos. Any other questions about eligibility for West Virginia birth to 3?
I had a question. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I can, Hannah.
I just wondered specifically with like premature, extreme, premature infants,
Hmm.
if there's any like specific requirements that would make them automatically eligible, or on the flip side, maybe make them not eligible.
I wish I had my eligibility policy handy. We do have in our risk factors, if a child is
Hmm.
less than, I believe, 32 weeks gestation and under 3.5 pounds, um, very low birth weight. And so we do consider for those children who are born prematurely those factors. And so it's a combination of a variety of different um, medical factors plus the family factors as well. And so it's um, under our risk factors. When I first started in birth to three 40 years ago, children did not survive the way they survive now. And it's just amazing to me the medical advances that have happened, that children that were you know born you know closer to 40 weeks, um, or children that were born at the 3.5 pounds, that they had such tremendous developmental delay. Now, just the medical supports that children are getting, they are leaving with less concerns about their development. And it's those really, really, really um, children under the 3.5. And I don't know if this is the person asking, Hannah, asking the question, if you're a nurse or someone who practices in that world, if you could
Um,
speak to
yeah,
that.
I do practice in that world. I work with the health plan as a case manager, and I'm doing a lot of infants with congenital abnormalities, NICU babies. But I actually also have just like real life experience too. I actually
Hmm.
had preemie twins. They were born at 27 weeks, and they were 2.5 pounds a piece.
Yeah.
And we did early intervention, and it was wonderful for us. So
Yeah.
I just was just curious if there were. I mean, I encourage it to most of the families I talk to that have the preemies, but I didn't know specifically when I'm talking to them if there were like certain ones that maybe wouldn't qualify, I guess.
I would say the safest thing to do for any of you on the call is, if you're working with families and supporting families, and the family expresses any concern about their child's development, to make a referral. And through our referral process, we support families, as you know, Hannah, because you receive services through our system. We support families in selecting the kinds of expertise, the kinds of team members that they feel would most appropriately be able to answer their questions about their child's development. We then, we're going to talk about how that eligibility is determined in a second. We conduct that evaluation to gather the information to determine the eligibility and the plan for the IFSP. Uh, we, in transition out of our system, we kind of have the same thoughts, that we never want to tell a family, you may not be eligible for preschool special education services. We want the preschool folks to determine that eligibility. And so when families are in the NICU or in other community programs that potentially might make a referral, or families that are with us today who are family members not working within the field, anytime that there's a concern, let us do the evaluation so that we can help to support the family and better understand their child's development. If the child's not eligible, link them to appropriate services. And if they are eligible, get them into services as soon as possible. Because babies shouldn't wait, families shouldn't wait. And we want to connect families to the supports that can help them in enhancing their child's development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
How long
Do you have a question, Tina? Maybe she doesn't. Yeah. Okay.
I have a
Um,
quick question, real
sure.
quick. If you have a family that's out of state that they've been receiving birth to three or early intervention services in a different state and they move here,
Mhm.
do their services just transfer or do they get another evaluation when they move here?
They typically would get another evaluation because each state's eligibility criteria is different. That's a really
Okay.
great question. And so some states have a very, very broad eligibility criteria. Other states have a very, very slim eligibility criteria. And so we want to ensure that every family has the opportunity to access services. We would request the family's written permission to obtain records from the other early intervention system to see what evaluation assessments were already conducted, to see what the IFSP said, to help inform our conversations with the family.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And so as we're talking about referrals, thank you for the questions because it's really um, helpful to our presentation today. And so just so you all know, anyone can make a referral. It could be a neighbor, it could be a parent themselves, it could be a physician, it could be the NICU, it could be other community partners. We always encourage that our referral sources discuss with the family that they're making a referral and a little bit about birth to three. And so on our West Virginia Birth to Three website, we do have flyers about West Virginia Birth to Three. We have a physician form that talks about the importance of making referrals. We also now have an electronic referral form. And so you can actually go to the West Virginia Birth to Three website and under referral, you can go in and it's a DocuSign document. And so you can complete your referral. You have to enter your email address into that DocuSign document, and then it automatically sends it to the right regional administrative unit that does our intakes. And so we're really thrilled to have an opportunity for people just to go in, and families can go in on their smartphones and fill out that referral form in DocuSign, and it zips right off to the right region. Otherwise, on our website, we do have a map to help people know where to make referrals if you want to call instead, or some physicians' offices fax. And so there's a variety of different ways now that you can make a referral. The nice thing about DocuSign is it's quick and easy, and you don't have to go anywhere else for the information. It automatically, depending on the county that the is entered into the referral form, sends the referral to the right place. And it's really, really wonderful to have that now. I couldn't tell if Alicia was going to ask a question. She looked like it for a second.
Okay, I was gonna put the website in the chat, but I wanted to make sure I had the right one. So I was looking that up.
Okay. Okay, thank you for doing that. And so once a referral is made, we contact families within 5 days of that referral. And so we want to be as responsive as possible. Um, and this is a very emotional time for many of our families. It can be a really scary time. Families have concerns about their baby's development, their toddler's development. And so we contact families within 5 days. We assign what's called an interim service coordinator, and their role is to ensure that families go through the evaluation assessment process, the determination as to whether or not a child is eligible, and the design of the education plan within 45 days of that referral. And so, once again, the first 3 years are so important for a child's development. We want to help families get connected to the right resources as quickly as possible. And so in our system, which is a little bit different than how most families, systems run, families get to select who is going to be on their evaluation assessment team based on what's called a service directory. And so we support families in knowing who's available, who has the expertise to be able to answer their questions about their child's development. And so instead of assigning a family a team, the family actually has that opportunity to determine who they would like to invite into their home to provide services. And so we made a commitment early on in the redesign of our system in the late 90s to really support families in making the selection as to who they want to be part of their child's evaluation assessment team. And so I have a slide here, and we have a more recent slide that I didn't insert yet into this PowerPoint. But one of the things that I think is very interesting to a lot of people who are learning about birth to three is the growth in the numbers of children that we're serving. And so you can see in 2015, we were serving 10.6% of the birth to three population. In the year 2022, we were serving 15.7% of the birth to three population. In 2023, I think it was 16.8% of the birth to three population. And so I think that tells a really wonderful story about the services that we provide, the ease of making a referral to a program, the needs of the infants and toddlers across the state, and the importance of having multiple ways for someone to make a referral and to continue to work collaboratively with all of our community partners to support these infants and toddlers with disabilities. In 2024, we had a little bit of a dip. It was like 160 children maybe. And so we're maybe going down a little bit. Something that might be very interesting to many of you in the healthcare field is that you can see a major increase between 21 and 22, and that is when we were coming out of the pandemic. And so we do know that in 20 into 21, a lot of families were not bringing their infants and toddlers to, well, baby checks. They might not have been connected to other community resources that might make a referral to West Virginia Birth to Three. They weren't out and about, maybe seeing our flyers or grabbing one of our pamphlets when they had concerns about their child's development. And we also, at that time, had a lot of kiddos that had families who were working and might not have been able to provide as much attention to the child during the day. Everyone was home. And so we have some children that also were using a lot of screens, spending a lot of time, screen time during that time for families to be able to perhaps work. And so we had a major increase coming out of the pandemic for 22 and 23. And now we think that we've leveled off. But it does just really tell a story of how the pandemic impacted and influenced infant and toddler development during that time, as well as, of course, access to appropriate services when you had concerns about your child's development. And so because we are a special education system, we are required to ensure that we protect families' procedural safeguards, or what we also can call our families' rights. And so every family referred to our system has the right for all of their information to be confidential. Families have a right to have a timely evaluation assessment to determine whether or not their child's eligible, and to have the individuals providing that evaluation assessment to be qualified and trained. Again, from referral to determining eligibility has to occur within 45 days to ensure that children get access to the services as quickly as possible. Families are also assured appropriate early intervention services if eligible, and so we'll be talking a little bit about how we determine those services. Families have the right to, if a child's found eligible, to say, I'm not interested at this time, or they can say, I'm interested in these services that are being recommended, but not interested in other services that are being recommended. And so again, it's that family centered approach to services. Our program is voluntary. Families do have the right, before any determination of eligibility or any change of service, to be informed and to be part of that conversation. So again, that family-centered model, families have the rights to see and review all their early intervention records. We require that all of our families receive a copy of their child's evaluation assessment and all of the activity notes that support the work that's being done with them to help them in supporting their child's development. And anytime that a family feels that their services aren't being provided as per the child's educational plan, or they have concerns about the services that they are receiving, they can access due process rights just like they would with a public school district. And so families can file a formal complaint, or they can file an informal complaint. We follow up with both of those. And so if a family's not pleased, we do have a CQI, quality assurance and monitor coordinator, that supports families if they have concerns about their child's services. And so very similar, our rights are based on the same rights that a family would have if they had a child in services through Part B special education as well. And so it's really important in the evaluation process for infants and toddlers to consider multiple sources of information. It's not like we're giving a child a spelling test or a math test. We are trying to gather information about a little one. And so we want to have a full picture of the child, including any medical diagnosis and the current health status of the child. So we do seek families' written permission to gather medical information. And one of the things that we have done recently is design a physician's health summary. That is on our West Virginia Birth to 3 website. It is a one-page document that physicians or social workers or other healthcare providers can complete to one page instead of sending a full child record upon referral, to let us know, does the physician have any concerns about development? Was this a child that had an NAS or NOWS diagnosis? If so, we hope that we would learn what substances the child might have been exposed to. Um, is this a child where there's concerns about vision or concerns about hearing? And so Hannah had that great question earlier about children who had substance exposure, how they are eligible. This new form, we hope, in partnership with people who support children in NICU or health settings, it allows an opportunity to provide more in-depth information that can help us in supporting that referral, supporting the child and the family. So we want really good health information. And upon referral, if a child has a diagnosis of Down syndrome and it's either on a referral form or on that physician health summary, that child's automatically eligible. And so the more complete the health information is that we receive, the quicker a family will get into services. And so we also, of course, are completing a formal assessment of the child's development. And so we do have a formal, we have a list of formal assessment tools that are approved for our field to use. For any of you that might be interested in the kinds of assessment tools that we use, that can be found on our website as well. So our providers need to be qualified and trained in the tools that they use. And so A formal assessment tool is used to look at the developmental delay. We also want to observe the child in everyday activities. We want to observe the parent-child interactions to get an idea of how we can support the family in helping to promote their child's development. We gather information about who has daily contact or interacts with the child, where the child spends time. We have so many children now in childcare. That's something new. Over the past few years, we have more and more children in childcare and childcare needing support. And then the kinds of behaviors and skills that the family is concerned about is, again, we gather information about the family's priorities and concerns to drive our multidisciplinary evaluation assessment. And so there's the timeline again of 45 days from referral. We have to determine eligibility, the areas that we evaluate. On our consent that families sign to give permission for us to evaluate, we let families know that even though their child, they may have concern about the child talking or maybe walking or sitting up, those kind of isolated skills, we want to look at the whole child because we know if a child has a delay in one area, it can influence or impact another area. And so sometimes families will have questions why we're looking at all development. And so a speech delay can impact the ability to interact with your peers, the inability to move within your environment. Impacts your ability to get to learning opportunities, um, you know, to get across the room to be able to access that toy that's interesting to you. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at all five areas of development. And again, families have the right to decline our services. They are voluntary. And so something that is very important to the work that we do is every family must have a service coordinator as part of their child's team that is assigned at referral. And so by federal law, families must have that service coordinator at referral. And their primary role is to assist families in understanding what Birth to Three is all about, protecting the procedural safeguards, ensuring that families understand the eligibility to educational planning process to ensure that services are going well for them. But even more importantly, helping to coordinate all the services that the family may be engaged with and to help link them to services that they might be eligible for that could help them in being able to meet their family's needs or their child's needs. And so our system really is focused on supporting families, even though ultimately um, that will help the development of the child. So we want to ensure that each and every family has good information about expectations around child's development and how their child's diagnosis or medical condition or delay may impact their child's development. We are a coaching model for families, and so we are required to be teaching families how they can support their child's development. And that's based on research. A speech therapist could go into a family's home and work one-on-one with a toddler for an hour, and the child would make progress. But what we know is if we teach the parents how to promote language throughout every activity of the day that they're engaged with their child, that the child's going to make much more progress. And so we want to support families in knowing how they can support their child's development and encourage that not to be, we're just going to dedicate a certain part of the day. We're going to sprinkle those strategies across mealtime, bath time, transition to bedtime, playtime, outings, so that we know that children of this age learn by doing. And so we want to reinforce across the day how to promote language or how to promote movement or play. etc. And again, coordinating our services with other programs the child may be in. And so if a child is attending childcare, we're supporting the childcare staff and how to promote the development in the activities that the child's doing there. If a child's in early Head Start, we might be seeing early Head Start teacher as a primary teacher, and we're supporting the parent and the Head Start teacher knowing how to adapt activities that the Head Start or home visitor is doing, because we might have that level of expertise that they might not have in adapting or using a communication system or a walker or a self-propelled wheelchair, those kinds of things. So we have a variety of different providers within our system. They are either licensed or registered or qualified through our process here with West Virginia Birth to Three. And so something new, if people haven't been to a Birth to Three session for quite a while, is we now have American Sign Language specialists. And right now, all of our American Sign Language specialists are adults who have or who are hard of hearing or have deafness. And so they are great supports to the family because they're modeling language. And our families that are accessing our ASL specialists are really thrilled to meet an adult that has deafness and to learn sign language and to learn a little bit about communication from someone who has real life experience. We also have what we call developmental specialists. We have hearing and vision specialists. Um, we have speech therapists, physical therapists. You can see the variety of different professionals. And if you haven't been to a Birth to Three overview for quite a while, another new discipline that may be new to you is our BCBAs and BCABAs. And so we are dedicated to, I think I mentioned before, evaluating for diagnostics around children that may be on the autism spectrum. And so we need to have the people within our system who can support families if that diagnosis is rendered. And so we're really thrilled to now have our BCBAs. And we are bringing down I think the average age of diagnostics for autism previously was around 4 years of age. We are now diagnosing around 2 years of age. And so we're giving families 2 additional years, 1 year of support through Birth to Three, but then transitioning into school-based services or other services already with that diagnosis. And taking a load of worry off a lot of families. And so it's really thrilling to be able to do that for our families in West Virginia. And so if eligible, we write an education plan. Our plan is called an individualized family service plan and is written with the family as a team. It is, again, grounded in families centered approach. And in our IFSP, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we gather information about how the family's day is going, their day-to-day activities, and we write with the family outcomes that the family wants to achieve based on how their day is going. And so if a child has a speech and language delay, we ask the family, how is that impacting your child's ability to let you know when he's hungry or what he wants to eat at meal times or snack time, or when he wants to transition to another activity or be able to interact with his peers at the child care center. So we then write outcomes to be able to address if there are challenges in those areas. And so instead of writing an outcome that says we want the child to say 3 to 5 words or 3 4 word sentences, our outcomes look more like we want Alicia to be able to use words at mealtime to express what she wants to eat. We then write strategies with the family to help them know what kinds of things can they do during mealtime to promote the ability for their child to express what they want to eat during that mealtime, or that they're all done, whether that's learning sign language or using pictures, or using a voice output communication system, addressing any behaviors that might be occurring with frustration, um, looking at preferences and how we can use preferences, backward chaining if they're also wanting to learn, feeding skills during that language opportunity. And so that's how children learn, is through those daily activities and routines. And so that is kind of the focus of our system, is that family coaching within those daily activities and routines. And so any questions around the eligibility process or our education plan, the focus of our education plan? I think the next slide may talk about natural environments and kind of give you a visual of you know, what a daily activity routine that we might be helping to support.
I have a quick question. As
Sure.
a caregiver
Mm-hmm,
at a school,
mm-hmm,
I know that families receive reports and they have access to what the plan is. Do we
mm-hmm.
also have access to that?
If you, as a person who's supporting a child, need access to the evaluation assessment reports and the education plan, you should let the family know that it would be very helpful to have that information, and the service coordinator would get the family's written permission to release it to you, because it's essential. I've been a preschool teacher. I've been an infant teacher and a preschool special education teacher for 3 years. And so all of our child care providers, all of our other care providers, whether you're a family home care provider or um, someone who supports the child within a natural environment, of course we want you to have the information you need to be able to know how to promote the child's development. Yes. Do you know, have you been invited to the child's educational planning team meetings to be part of that as a caregiver for the child?
Not at this time. At the school, we're both new, the director and assistant director.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But we do have children who already received birth to three.
Hmm.
They do get services here.
Hmm.
We want to be able to collaborate. We want to know what
Yeah.
they're looking for, what they're working on. So I was just curious if there's a way to check all of that.
Yeah. And I love this question, Angela. I absolutely love this question. I mentioned that our role with families is to coach families to know how to promote a child's development. And I sprinkled in that if we were working with Early Head Start or other programs, that we would want to be collaborative and coach those individuals. Our providers should not be going into a child care setting and either taking a child to another room or taking a child to the corner and working with the child. They should be having conversations with you about what you're observing about the child within your environment, and what kind of support you need, because we are a coaching model. We should be there to support you. We are not a therapy model. And so if someone is coming in, and some childcare centers they kind of want our folks to go in and take a child to another room to do speech therapy or work in the corner with a child and not disrupt the classroom. We don't want to disrupt classrooms. What we want to do is support you in knowing how to promote that child's development, or how to help that child be successful at circle time when you're reading a story, how to be engaged, and or whatever activities you do in a typical childcare setting, um, you're identifying what supports you need. We should be working ourselves out of a job in childcare settings. We should be going in and helping you to know how to support the child and then leaving. Because I know, having been a childcare provider and been a preschool teacher, how disruptive it can be to have people coming in and out of your classrooms. And so if you want to have a private call, I would love to support you. I love that you've asked the question and want to collaborate. And we want to collaborate in a way that's the least disruptive to you, collaborate in a way that supports you as a care provider, and then get out of the way. Once you say, if Angela says, I got this, I now know how to support this child throughout the day in all the activities that this child does as part of our routines of the day. Um, when you say, I got this, we should be out of there. Does that make sense? Is it speaking to you? It's the same thing as working with families. And we don't want, I know some childcare centers have lots of people coming in and out. And we actually have a project right now where we're designing some promotional materials to um, more strategically, intentionally talk about what the partnership should look like. I hope that was helpful. Yeah. And then another part of that collaboration, Angela, is then also how do we help the family know how it's going? Is it you sharing in your daily report to the family that the child's doing really well? Are providers asking you to sign um, a note saying what they did while they were there? We may have to have a call. So if you could privately in the chat, let Alicia know, um, you know, how I could contact you, we could. But I hope that was helpful. We could get together.
So to piggyback off of that, there is a consent that the child care providers can sign, that the parents would give the child care providers to sign so they can get access to the IFSP.
The service coordinator would get the family's written permission on our
Mhm.
consent to release information form. It's called a consent to release information so that we could release information to the child care center, including copies of the child's assessment and the IFSP meeting. IFSP. And that's another thing I was heading there and I got myself turned around is you should be invited, if at all possible, to the educational planning meeting because you have valuable information, just like a family has valuable information about their child's development. You have valuable information about what you're seeing as the strengths and needs of the child within your setting. And so that word collaboration is so important. Your question is so important. We want to collaborate with you. And you also are important to the child's progress, right? You know the child the best in that setting. We're just in and out. And so you should be essential in giving updates as to the child's progress. And when you no longer need us, we should be out of there, not disrupting your classroom. Because you probably got this more than, you know, we should only be needed when you say, hey, I really need help. I've never worked with a communication system before, or I've never worked with a child on the autism spectrum and these behaviors. You should be guiding what you need from us. That makes sense. Natural environment. Oop, I clicked on the wrong thing again. And so this is kind of along that same theme is that we need to recognize, and I'm just going to broaden it now that I know Angela and her friend is here, recognize that families and other caregivers are the agents of change. We're just the support system for that change to occur. And so we're consulting, coaching, teaching. That's what our role is, and individualizing. And so through that collaboration that you're talking about, Angela, and for our families as well, we individualize the frequency and intensity of the services based on what you need or based what the family needs. And so we're not a therapy model where someone says, we feel this is how often we should be here. It should be that collaboration with the family and with other caregivers. And so I think this may be getting close to the end of the information I was going to provide today. And so, with our federal law, we are required as children are getting closer to their third birthday to start discussing with families um, the important decisions around transitioning out of our program when their child turns 3. And of course, sometimes children transition much earlier. And so our service coordinators begin having those conversations with families. We design a transition plan. We help families know what's available within their communities. And we help support the family in that really important decision as to where would I like my child to receive services once they're no longer in West Virginia birth to 3. And part of that too is a very important conversation with families about how this transition is impacting them. Because what we know for many, many years is that we get very close to the families that we're serving. A lot of times we're in their homes. We've worked with them for a year to 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And so sometimes families feel it's a loss of their team and they're moving into a transition where they're going to have less contact with the professionals that are supporting their child because their child may be going to, a child care setting or a Head Start setting or a school setting. And so we support families in that transition and also want to work closely with the receiving agencies to help that child successfully transition. So we begin having conversations with families to help them think about the next environment and what are the kinds of skills children need in that next environment to sit and listen to a story or to be able to navigate a playground. They might have to navigate getting off and on a bus. And so we begin helping families to think about um, the kinds of skills their child are going to need in the next placement or the next environment. And we can start working on that early to help teach the child some of those skills. Head Start sometimes has family style meals, and so children are scooping their mashed potatoes and putting them on the plate. And so, how can we practice that at home before the child goes into an environment where that might be a skill that's needed to be successful? And maybe children, especially coming out of the pandemic, we've heard from receiving agencies that children had less social skills, less language skills because, they were at home because of the pandemic. And so how can we help, you know, give children opportunities to be with other children before they transition into a group setting. So they have a little bit of experience, peer-based playing and being around other children, etc. And so these are just examples of things that we would do, helping families to think about the next environment, helping families to visit classrooms, um, supporting the child and family, and giving them information about what's available within their communities. And so, Alicia, that is all the content, but I don't know. I think we have a few minutes left if there's any additional questions or thoughts or anything that I could support with additional information. I'd be more than happy to be available.
Yeah, we definitely have some time for questions. I did put the website in the chat, so if you, I guess, have any questions about the website, you have if you want to take a few minutes to look at that, and then you can ask Mel about the website. Um, Yeah, is there any questions at all? We have a few minutes. So this PowerPoint, this presentation will be it is recorded and it'll be available on our website, on the WVU CED website, within the next week or so. All the virtual speaker series are recorded and available to view after this session. That was a question in the chat. Someone asked if they were able to get the PowerPoint. Um, yeah, I don't know. We record it. I don't know, Mel, do you send out the PowerPoint or is the
If you
recording?
if if you give me, I don't know if you have contact information for the individuals who are attending, um,
Hmm.
and so I could send the actual paper PowerPoint, the PowerPoint slides, if that's what people would like.
Okay. Yeah, that was just in the chat. It was just asked if the session was recorded or the PowerPoint could be sent out. So it is recorded and there's the option to have it sent out as well. So
I guess I could share some of our major projects right now for anyone who might be interested, since I didn't know who the audience was, and so I feel like I'm just playing a little bit, but by ear here. But we do have some projects, since there were questions around substance exposure. We do have a team that is coordinating some activities around supporting families that have children who were substance exposed. And so we have had a guest speaker series ourselves where we had individuals come to share about how substance exposure impacts development. We have had people come and present about how to work with peer recovery coaches, which more and more we're working with peer recovery coaches. We did have some information that went out during an NAS month, which was in not April, October, November, one of the months recently. We also have a team that's working on um, getting additional training and support out around autism. And we have a series of communities of practice that are open to families. We also have a social emotional team that has a series of presentations that are open to families. I think they've done things around what to do with big emotions when your child has big emotions, what to do when your child, you're seeing new behaviors. And we also have something called a lunch and learn. And once again, visit our website. Our lunch and learns are open to anyone. And a lot of our other opportunities, training opportunities are open to anyone. And so our lunch and learns, we target a statewide resource once a month. And so you might have a month where we're talking about Social Security and how children qualify for Social Security or children with special health care needs. We have had sessions around food insecurity, so we've had WIC. We try to look at kind of the landscape of what's happening with families in West Virginia to set our schedule for the year. And so you're more than welcome to hop on any of our lunch and learns, hop on any of our training sessions. We let's see what other things that we're doing that might be of interest to this group. We're really looking for guest speakers, and so I know we have someone from NICU. If there is someone who works in NICU who would like to talk about um, what the NICU experience is like for families now, the kinds of babies that you're seeing and supporting, and the needs that families have as you make referrals to us. I think that would be a lovely partnership if there's anyone who would be interested in doing something like that. And so I love collaborating. We love um, getting as much information out to anyone who's serving our infants and toddlers and their families. And it's open to all of you, many of our sessions, and then vice versa. If you feel there's something that you could bring, I know we always have the CED, probably every other year, do a walkthrough of all the programs that the CED offers. And so just wanted to open that up. Feel free to come to our sessions and feel free to offer if you have something you feel you could bring to support our field as they're supporting families.
There was a question in the chat too. Is there a place that they can get physical pamphlets for clients about Birth to Three?
Yes, and so on our West Virginia Birth to Three website, if you, and maybe I could go on our website and instead of just talking about it, get to the website. Let me stop sharing and I'll show you how to navigate to that. So Alicia, if you can let me know if I'm sharing.
Not yet.
Okay. I have to get into full screen to share.
And then another question was, can they access the documents that are used by the evaluation team on the website? She's a child care provider for young toddlers. And
Can you say more about that? As those documents are for our providers to complete their evaluation assessments, and so help me understand what you're wanting to maybe accomplish, and I can.
this just says, she can chime in if she wants to unmute too, but I had to scroll down. She's a child care provider for young toddlers and would like a better understanding of what is used during the evaluations.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see if this. I think you can see my screen now.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, let me make this bigger. Okay, on our professionals tab, and maybe this is what would help you. Under our standard documentation link, there is a link called evaluation assessment. And if you're looking to see the kinds of tools that our folks use, there's a listing of, maybe I'm not getting far enough down. There's a listing of our assessment tool. And so if that's what you're wanting, and that's where you would find it. I can open that up just to show you. It talks a little bit about the purpose and the kinds of evaluation assessment tools we use. And then by discipline, these are our approved tools that our providers have options to use within our system. And then there was another question. Let me get back to where you can get brochures or pamphlets about Birth to Three. And so under our publications tab, there are, you could peruse our information. Here's our Have You Got Concerns About a Child's Development? And I think to request copies of that, you can either call West Virginia Birth to Three, or we have a literature request form. And I thought it was connected to this, but it must be back where we just were. So let me go back there. and see if we can find it. Let's see if it's in our operational forms. And if you put your information in the chat, we can get that to you as well. See if it's, I would have to ask our web person. Oh, here it is. So under additional forms, and so you could fill this out. And if you wanted information on just West Virginia birth to 3, I don't see where it's listed on here. So let me check on that if we could get your contact information so I can reach out to you. And then I guess one other thing is I know people are probably ready for lunch, is I talked about our new electronic referral form. And so let me go to our referral tab, and then I'll show you the training tab. And then right here is under how do I make a referral? Here's our secured electronic referral form. And so you just follow the instructions. It seems a kind of weird because it's a DocuSign document, but you just start and follow all the instructions, and you can then once you put your email address in, it zips it along to the right place for intake. And then, oops, I don't want to leave the site. I want to get back. Oh, hopefully it's going to let me get back to birth to 3. Let me do this. I wanted to show you how to know about our trainings that are available that you can come to. And so we, on our home page, you can see there's a link directly to our professional development and training, and it gives you an overview of the kinds of trainings that we have available. I highly recommend the Lunch and Learns if you're interested in resources, the most updated information about resources. But we have pre-recorded things, and so you can see there's a variety of different training opportunities. And so just peruse our website, and I'll put in the chat as the final, well, on the PowerPoint when we send it out, all my contact information's at the end. And so for those of you who might want brochures, those of you who might want to know more about how to access our training, or those of you who might have questions, those of you who might want a personal phone call to work out some solutions for our partnerships with you, please feel free to use my contact information and I'll direct you in the right direction. I really want to thank everyone for their patience. I haven't done a training for a while. And so
Well, you did fantastic. Thank you for presenting for us. That was a lot of wonderful, helpful information that I know helped a lot of people. But does anyone else have any questions before we end today's session?